Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs, committee members, and fellow guests, thank you for the opportunity to share my experiences, my thoughts on the crisis in Sudan. I can't remember how many times I've been in this room making testimonies. And I've been working in Sudan since 1993. So what is it that keeps the cycle going? It's a legitimate question. Why do we keep coming back in here and talking about Darfur? Who remembers Save Darfur? It's gone. There was a civil war in the south, and now we have another war between the RSF and SAF. What is that string of commonality? In my opinion, it is Islamic extremism. It's the same Islamic extremism that we see in other groups. That would be Hamas, Hezbollah. It is in that part of the world. And we talk about, when I look at Sudan today, I see a new epicenter forming of regional conflict. And the countries that are involved today, the United States, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, Iran, Russia, China, Chad, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, and Libya. And there's probably more that I don't know about. This involvement is noted not to assign any blame, but to demonstrate that the scale of geopolitical investment in Sudan's outcome is staggering. Regional actors are coalescing, each with a vested interest. Ending the war cannot be achieved by isolating any one actor, but it's going to require coordinated restraint among many. Since 1989, Sudanese politics have been dominated by ideological positioning driven by the Muslim Brotherhood. The National Congress Party, led by Omar al-Bashir, who I've met on several occasions, took control of the government, and the Brotherhood-linked National Congress Party grew from being a political party into the ideological spine of a militarized Islamist state with a violent footprint across the country. As a perpetrator of this violence, the Rapid Support Forces. In 2019, after months of mass civilian protests demanding an end, this is the people of Sudan raising up. They demanded an end to Islamist authoritarian rule, and Sudan's military removed President Omar Bashir and formed a transitional government with civilian leaders. This transitional council collapsed in October of 2021 when military leaders, reportedly led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and supported by General Mohammed Dagalo Hamedi, staged a coup, detaining Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and dissolving the civilian government. Then in April of 2023, this alliance fractured and Khartoum dissolved into open conflict, which has absolutely burnt the country. The current civil war has seen the RSF position itself against the state that created it. It is crucial to keep these historical and ideological roots in mind. Both the SAF and the RSF grew out of the same ideological fabric that is woven deeply into Sudanese power structures. It is not just a fight between two generals. It is a legacy of entrenched Islamist political networks that now stand at odds with each other. You've heard the numbers many times today. My version of them are this. An estimated 30.4 million people, roughly 2/3 of the Sudanese population, need humanitarian assistance. 21 million people face acute food insecurity, and 6.5 million are in or near total famine conditions. Famine has been declared in different locations across Sudan 3 separate times over the past 2 years, with the latest declaration occurring in November, this time in El Fasher, in Darfur, and Kadugli in South Kordofan, with 20 additional locations considered at risk of famine. All of this famine talk sounds it's technical, but what it translates into is seeing people dying on the ground because they don't have food. I know these things because Samaritan's Purse has been involved 2 times in 2 years in statistically proving, which is a very exhausting process, that famine has existed, that it meets the benchmarks of famine. The country has descended into an intractable war that has no military conclusion, except for the continued loss of civilian life. The SAF and the RSF must be compelled to accept a ceasefire. I also want to point out there's a lot of talk today, even coming from me and others, about humanitarian needs. But you cannot solve a political problem with a humanitarian solution. I've learned that in over 35 years of doing this. The first and overriding priority must be to stop the war. The fastest way to accomplish that is to pressure both sides to accept a ceasefire. In order to actualize it, it will require observation by a credible international body. I'm actually thinking of a group of EU monitors and not something like the UN peacekeepers that were in Darfur back when you were there. In order, this body needs the broad political support and the authorities necessary to monitor and to enact enforcement on both sides by the terms of the ceasefire agreement, utilizing political and economic leveraging. The second requirement is humanitarian access. There's been a lot said about that today. Sudan's civilians are not simply caught in the crossfire, they're being starved by the collapse of all of the economic and social mechanisms in their society. Aid corridors must be open and confidently provide safe passage into Darfur, Kordofan, Khartoum, Jazeera, all without taxation, diversion, or interference. Humanitarian access cannot be optional. It must be negotiated and guaranteed at the beginning of the ceasefire. Thirdly, a civilian transitional authority must be reconstituted. It cannot be symbolic, and it should be drawn from across Sudan. As Sudanese society is multi-ethnic, a wider civilian body is required for nationhood. Both primary forces in this war emerged from the same security architecture, and I think it's important to remember that. That system fused governance from ideological patronage and armed structures. The people of Sudan want this legacy corrected. That's what they voted for in 2019. Sudan will not move forward if its political identity and security apparatus remain defined by structures born of ideological brutality. Sudan requires a civilian constitutional structure that protects worship while ending the conflation of armed power with religious identity. The state should not use religion to dominate and exclude. A state in which Sudanese may freely worship is only possible if the political authority is accountable to civilians, but not to the military command and theological claims. The United States is well served by a clear policy that prevents flirting with the ideological and organizational network from which emerged Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and other armed movements whose destabilizing consequences now reach from Gaza to the Red Sea. President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio are to be applauded for recognizing the dangers of the Muslim Brotherhood and moving to declare them as a foreign terrorist organization. Sudan can be stable and functioning with a civilian constitutional framework where faith is protected and politics are not defined by military force. A stable, functioning Sudan is not a favor to the world, but it is an American interest. A stable Sudan will make America stronger, safer, and more prosperous. I want to thank President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio for paying attention to this matter, and I also want to thank the members of the Quad for their efforts. That includes the United States, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. My last statement is this. This war will not produce a victor. The war must end.
Nádus, the voice of freedom.